Hello, and welcome to What's Up with Energy, a GridX podcast. I'm your host, Georgia Knapp, and today we're actually going to move a little bit outside of the German market, which is a bit unusual for this podcast, and we're going to talk more about the UK energy market plus G100. And to help me learn more about this, we have the founder and CEO of Upvolt, Alex Lomax. So, Alex, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Georgia. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
And I guess, can you start by actually explaining to our listeners what Upvolt is, how long you've been around?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Upvolt was founded about 2 years ago, and we went operational about 18 months ago. As you mentioned, we're a UK-based renewable energy business, an installer, really. So what we do essentially is we help homes and businesses deliver renewable tech. And that's kind of the premise upon which we've founded the business, is really to improve, and we'll come on to it later, I suppose, but improve market deployment, improve penetration of renewable technology, both hardware and software, for those homes and businesses. Obviously it's a very rapidly evolving space, but it's one that's been around for 20 plus years. And actually in the UK, you've had a lot of high quality operators delivering good renewable technology in the early years of sort of renewables, whether it's solar and batteries and EV chargers. And so Upvolt ourselves have recognized that as we've come into the market. In fact, myself and my co-founder Daniel are not originally from the renewable industry. We're actually from the financial services industry. And so we moved in a few years ago, and we thought, there's some really high quality businesses out here, and a real pillar of what we're trying to deliver is combine that really high quality local operation with a 21st century and a real sort of forward-leaning mindset in terms of delivery of that new technology as it comes through. So what we do at Upvolt is we partner with and acquire existing businesses and bring them all in under the Upvolt family, and kind of really leverage the local and regional expertise that these operators have had for 20 plus years, delivering for their communities, delivering for the local governments, and as we'll come on to, it's really important to have the good relationships and understanding of the local district network operators, and really marry that with Upvolt as we become a national installer, taking advantage and delivering cutting edge technology, be it on the energy management side, be it on the design side, all the way through customer journey and back end operations. So we ourselves as Upvolt are reasonably early in our journey, but we have people and businesses within our group that have been doing this for a very long time and have been doing a really great job of it, and we're just simply giving them a platform, a larger platform on which they can continue to deliver for their communities and for the grid itself, as well, as we'll come on to.
Nice. And then you said you started off in the financial sector. What made you then pivot into the clean tech sector?
Yeah, look, I mean, I have a really strange background actually. So I was originally a medical doctor, and then moved into investment banking, as it were. So essentially mergers and acquisitions. And my partner and I, my business partner and I, we worked together in financial services, and we, for a number of years, were looking to kind of move into operating ourselves, and really wanted to kind of help deliver benefits to the UK market, and we kind of very early on centered on renewables, because we think it's an opportunity where there's really great technology coming through. It's a large market. It's a win for all stakeholders, right? I mean, the grid needs to decarbonize. Homeowners and businesses need to manage their costs and take control of their energy, just their energy in general, as well as their independence long term. And we think there's a huge need for larger scale, more reliable, better quality businesses, in a way that's very hard for these subscale sort of more regional businesses to scale up and deliver, right? It's something we've seen in a lot of different industries, and one that we felt was coming here to the UK, given how far ahead the DACH region, the Nordic region, the US, which obviously your listeners and yourself will know much better than maybe the UK market, how far advanced and developed those markets are with regards to the types of technologies we're discussing. We are quite far behind that in the UK. So we settled quite early on the renewables side, and I think as we looked more and more into it and kind of looked um, into actually delivering it and working with people and finding businesses and stakeholders across all areas, I think it's something that became a real passion of ours and is something that's something that I couldn't imagine not doing now. You know, when you find yourself step by
Yeah.
step moving into something, and then eventually you're in it and realize, okay, well, this is what I do now, and I can't imagine myself doing anything different. And it's as I said, it's a real passion of mine and Daniel's to really push this forward, and hopefully we are helping it and doing our bit for the UK market, and hopefully we'll continue to do so.
And then you were just starting to touch upon it, but could you, I don't know, tell me more about the UK energy market? Because, like you were saying, it's not quite as advanced as like DACH and the Nordics, but I mean, the Nordics, they're in a league of their own half the time.
There's two ways of looking at it. There are multiple angles to look at it, actually. And what I would say is that fundamentally, there's been a reasonable amount of investment in the production of renewable energy within the UK.
Hmm.
Overall, the infrastructure faces significant challenges, and we are underinvested within the grid. I think every single person in the UK could tell you that. I mean, recently, last week, Ofgem announced 28 billion of investment into grid infrastructure as part of an overall 91 billion pound required investment by 2031. So there's a lot of work that the grid needs to do in order to get up to the sufficient quality and infrastructure to be able to fully decarbonize. But in reality, various governments have actually made significant investments in large scale infrastructure projects like wind and solar over the
Hmm.
last 15 to 20 years. The issue is we have lagged behind Germany, the US, and others, but really we have a bottleneck issue because we have a huge amount of intermittent renewable energy within certain areas of the grid that result in curtailment and project delays and wasted energy. The,
Hmm.
fundamentally, it's just, we have challenges within storage, we have challenges within decentralized energy networks, but fundamentally, we do have strong generation for renewables, but we have a very weak transmission and distribution and contribution from distributed energy networks, as it were. So if we look at it from the penetration of renewable energy into businesses and homes that are tied to the grid is very low in reality. Um, and so it's a bit of a rambling answer, I think, in terms of the state of the UK grid. But I think the thing I would say overarchingly is that we require significantly more investment from the government, which is
Hmm.
supposedly coming through. But we also need um, to change the way in which the grid is decarbonizing by promoting sort of decentralized energy networks, right? We need more homes and more businesses to take control of their energy and their energy independence and have integrated systems with a battery that are tied to the grid in order that we can manage issues as they come up as the grid further decarbonizes. So we are at the beginning of this journey. And so I don't want to sound like I'm being too negative because we are, in my opinion, on the right path, but it
Hmm.
is one where we are, headline probably 10, 15 years behind the dark market.
Would you say that has been compounded by Brexit, or was it already kind of lagging even before that?
Look, it's a good question, and it's very easy to blame absolutely everything on Brexit. But I would say we were probably lagging prior to that. I think
Okay.
we've had a couple of false dawns on renewable deployment that have
Hmm.
kind of left their battle scars, I think, for both voters and individuals. If I'm really honest, we had
Hmm.
the feed-in tariff in 2012, 2013 that I think has been a real challenge and left people feeling that it was a real issue for them. And because I speak to customers all the time about these types of things, and then we also have had the rent to roof scheme from 2017, 2018, which also resulted in a bit of a calamity for a lot of people. Probably not a topic to go into today, but what those two quite public situations resulted in is people um, taking longer to educate themselves around the benefits of renewable energy.
Hmm.
And therefore, I think it's been more challenging for governments to get significant support behind large scale spending within renewables. Because of obviously the lead time to benefit from an energy price perspective is quite long, but also
Yeah.
individuals and homes, because we haven't had significant subsidy programs when you compare them to the other geographies we've mentioned on this podcast already, that is that's been more challenging for individuals and businesses to make near-term economic decisions that are in their benefit.
And then going into G100, because that's obviously been a big topic in the UK all of 2025, correct? Or was it also in 2024?
Look, I think it's been a pretty big topic for a while, in all honesty. I mean,
Oh,
there's
even longer. Okay.
obviously, I think because fundamentally, so if we take a step back and think about G100, we have essentially a regulatory system here called Micro Generation Certification Scheme, the MCS,
Mm-hmm.
which essentially um, all installers need to be able to be MCS compliant, and therefore when you install systems that are to be connected to the grid, they have a classification placed upon them, a G number, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
and that is to tell the system how large is it, and do we need to limit or be aware of how much potential energy that system is going to be putting into the grid. So like a G98 compliancy is a system below requirements to be G100 compliant. So you can basically be below 3.6 kilowatt of energy, and that
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to make an application to MCS. You don't need to make an application to your DNO to be, which is your your sort of district network operator. So
Mm-hmm.
the operator within a particular area in terms of managing the grid within that segment in the UK. And therefore, what G100 compliancy is saying, okay, well, if we are looking at this system and think it's large enough that we want to potentially limit how much energy it can put into the grid so we don't overload the local area, then you need to make a G99 application, and you need to therefore install G100 compliant products. And essentially, what G100 compliant products mean is that the grid and the DNO is comfortable that that product is able to be controlled, essentially. So things like
Got it.
inverters, batteries, software, these types of things all need to be G100 compliant, which is basically to say that they've been tested and
Mm-hmm.
the grid is comfortable that we know how to control these if we choose to
Import,
control them.
export. Okay.
Exactly. Then what you do is if you're installing as an installer, if you're installing a system larger than 3.6 kilowatts, i.e. above a threshold, and that threshold I guess may change over time, then
Mm-hmm.
we know as the installer we need to make a G99 application to the DNO um,
Got
for that
it.
system, right? And what that G99 application is saying is like, look, we're about to install a system that we think is, do you think is sizable enough that may warrant limitation? And
Okay.
therefore, they then decide, okay, well, you're using all G100 compliant products, so that one tick, we're comfortable that we know that we can limit this, so you're past step one. And then they look at the system, they look at the design, they look at the energy expectations, they look at what's the setup in the area, and then they decide whether or not to make a an import or an export limitation. I don't know the exact how long it's exactly been in
Mm-hmm.
place, but I know it's been a topic of discussion. We've been limiting um, systems essentially since for at least the last 2-3 years since I've been in the sector. So um, what I would say is that it's a very important piece of the puzzle, right? Fundamentally, because as we decarbonize the grid, we need the grid to be comfortable that one, it's fully invested.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a topic for a different conversation or earlier, um, but also that the DNOs and therefore the grid at large feel comfortable that they understand and can control how the grid is going to operate in the context of all of these systems putting energy into the grid and taking energy from the grid. And therefore, this concept of limitation has been around for quite a long time. I think the difference is that as when I talk about this is the time now for the UK, as we've had lots of stakeholders, be it um, manufacturers or international suppliers of other areas, be it software or otherwise, coming into the UK market, I think it's become a very important distinction and clarification that those businesses have needed to get their heads around to then come into the UK, right? Because it's a requirement to operate, basically. It's table stakes, right? And therefore, for us, um, it's an interesting topic because obviously customers are very concerned about limitations, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore obviously we as a company spend a lot of time thinking through design and thinking about compliancy today and then how things can develop in the future. and managing sort of export-import limits, as it were.
And then historically, the UK has largely focused on single asset optimization, and I think primarily EV chargers.
Yep.
Now, now that you guys are having to deliver fully compliant or fully G100 compliant integrated systems, how has this shift transformed your design approach?
I think about the UK market in a few different ways, right? We've had a lot of large scale investments, either from business or from government, right? And I think EV chargers is one of those classic ones where it was hugely
Yeah.
subsidized. And therefore, a lot of the EV charger infrastructure was delivered essentially due to government subsidy, right? It wasn't, or it accelerated it significantly. I don't want to be unfair to participants, but I think we've done a really good job of delivering large scale EV charger, a distributed EV charging capability, and therefore that was a real focus. I think from our perspective as an installer, where we're looking directly to deliver for homes and businesses rather than deliver large scale infrastructure projects or large scale off grid projects, our design system hasn't changed dramatically, because for us, we've always been looking to deliver to customers a bespoke designed, highest quality system that works for them, that they can have for the long term, right? These are decisions that homes and businesses hopefully are making for the next 20, 30 years based on their system. So from that perspective, it always makes sense, assuming budget and practicality and so other factors, it always makes sense to have a fully integrated system.
And as you've been seeing more people moving from like just a solar panel or just a EV and then integrating the battery into this, have you seen much with energy management systems also starting to be more integrated into this or
It's
becoming
look,
more of a player?
Look, I think energy management's a particularly interesting area, right? I mean, I know you guys obviously think so, but
A little bit.
just a little bit, yeah. It's reasonably important, but I think it's a huge topic, right? Because energy management really used to mean observation and diagnostics, right? Let's be really
Yeah.
honest, right? And I think a lot of people, I find that having come into the sector a little bit late, I suppose, the last few years, it's been quite interesting to not come with the baggage into the sector, because I think a lot of these things people have been talking about for a long time. Energy management's been a topic for a really long time, but I think that there's a big difference between what energy management has meant for the last maybe 5 years ago, back 5 years, to what it's going to mean
Mm-hmm.
for the last 5 years and the next 5 years. We're right in the middle of an evolution and a revolution within energy management. And I think it's exceptionally important um, for people to be educated about it, but also for people to take advantage of it, because smart energy management systems that are integrated with your fully integrated system is pivotal to deliver,
Yeah.
full benefits, transparency, control, um, and to do that without it being a burden on the asset owner necessarily, because you can do a lot of the core operations can be delivered through smart technology. So I actually think it's
Mm-hmm.
exceptionally important, because not only is it beneficial for the customer, and it, from having a system that works for them and is able to be managed and visualized in a way that achieves that in the shortest time frame possible. Comparing it to people back in the day not realizing that their system wasn't working until their energy bills went back up. This sort of horrendous situation. But I also
Yeah.
think if we look at where we are in the UK right now, which is at the beginning of the curve, and we look at where you guys are in the DACH region, where the Nordics are, and how those markets have developed with regards to flexibility, grid control, um, you know, all of the fundamental pieces around the decentralized energy network application within a larger scale decarbonizing grid, I can't see that being fully achieved without high quality smart EMS.
And then since the primary goal of G100 is trying to balance this export import limitations, have you experienced, or just Upvolt in general, um, grid constraints that have actually like maybe held up a project, or maybe you've had to try to find a workaround when it comes to a grid connection
Yeah,
point
look,
constraint?
yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, They do happen. I think this
Mm-hmm.
whole export import limitation point is a really important one. But I think because of the fear of its impact is quite regularly overblown. And I think I would say that from a if I look at the number of projects it impacts for us, that number is quite low. In terms of nearly everyone has a grid limitation, but the
Mm-hmm.
reality is their limitation is related to how much they can put in at one time, and the reality is that's usually well inside of what you're actually likely to do. So
Oh,
I think the it's like the impact of it is overblown, but the reality of it is very true, and it's kind of
okay.
measuring that with people where obviously as a company it's top of mind as we think about design. It's top of mind as we think about um, installation, commissioning, as well as making sure not only is the system designed for today, but also that it's going to the customer is going to be able to um, make best use of it into the long term. But from a practical application perspective, the impact is actually much more limited, we find.
Okay, so when it comes to the home ones, I mean, I don't, are there any fail safes you can speak to, or is it all pretty standard then?
I mean, look, I mean, in terms of fail safes, obviously, this is when you come back to the G100 compliancy, right? I mean, fundamentally,
Yeah.
if you're having an import limitation placed on the system, then you're doing it through a G100 compliant product, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to make the installation in the first place, and therefore, hardware-based fail safes are first, and then software ones are secondary.
Mm-hmm.
We use certified G100 controllers and inverters. Our energy management is G100 compliant. Um, Clearly, safe states on failure are designed in a very standard way, right? I mean, beyond those, things you'd expect, loss of comms, grid faults, etc. And therefore, we have redundant measurement and validation. You can go through in very technical ways how fail-safes are managed, but I would say probably generally it's pretty standard. And I think a lot of the regulation and practices that we are putting in place here in the UK are quite aligned, in my opinion, with what we've seen as the best practices in other geographies that have obviously decarbonized much faster than we have. I think we're very lucky in that regard as a
Yeah.
UK market that we, as a grid, as a business, as individuals who are making these financial decisions, can look to what's being done so well in your region, in the Nordic region, and others.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is also I keep calling it G102, but I think it's like G100 slash two. Have you heard of this at all?
And so yeah, so I think basically fundamentally, if you think about the G100/2 issue, it's really around bringing in more um, integrated players within that system. So whether it be multiple inverters, whether it be a smart meter, whether it
Mm,
be the smart energy management system coming in, and how those can all interact, and ensuring that you have consistent control, i.e. G100 compliancy, across the entire system. And I guess that's what you were meaning when you were talking about having
yeah.
those that issue two come up. But I guess in my world, I've always been facing issue two.
And then you said that the UK, you guys have actually a high penetration of smart meters?
Yeah, so I think it's 2/3 of all
Okay.
meters in place as of this year were smart meter. So pretty high rate, and I think there's been a big push towards that over the last sort of
Mhm.
5 to 10 years, which I think we've done a pretty good job on. So hopefully we can build on that, with the rest of core renewable tech, as it were.
And then actually, my last question is just as again G100, smart charging regulations, and the general UK energy market evolves. Are there any upcoming regulatory or market shifts that Upvolt is watching?
Oh wow. Okay. How long do you have? Uh, uh, so look, I think it's one thing I'd start by saying, look, in a really positive way, it's an ever-evolving market for us here at the moment in the UK, and I think that's a real positive because it's a sea of change, and there seems to be a real consensus or a swell of support, grassroots level for change. A lot of that has been driven by probably number one on that list, which is energy prices.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, energy prices, I think for everyone over the last particularly 5 years, have seen significant volatility, I would say, more than anything else. I think it's really the volatility. Obviously, prices have gone up significantly, particularly, they go up in spurts, as it were. But practically wise, in the last 25 years here in the UK, energy prices have gone up on average by 7%. And that's actually what we're told to tell customers. But the
Oh.
reality here is that, on a go forward basis, the reality for us is that energy prices have a real impact on people, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge, huge outlay for residents and for businesses here in the UK, and it's a real challenge for a lot of people, and it's actually a big part of the reason why people do come to us, right? Because it's trying to fix a problem for them that is real and getting worse, because electrification burden is going up, and energy prices are going up. And if you try and fix because we also install and manage heat pumps. So if you were to fix your gas bill by installing a heat pump, you're actually significantly increasing your electricity bill, and therefore, having that
Mm-hmm.
multi-tech capability that we do is really important. But I would say the number one topic that is permeates and consistent and will always be a challenge for people is energy prices. And I think it's very important
Mm-hmm.
that we, as a business, as a consultative business that are trying to help people think through what are very um, technical and high cost decisions, that we are at the forefront of understanding a lot of these topics. So energy prices, I would say, obviously, definitely is number one or is one of them. Um,
Yeah.
Clearly, public policy it
Mm-hmm.
remains a very important topic. Generally, obviously we have over the last few years we have a shifting political landscape, and I think policy related to the grid, specific support for homes and businesses, as well as the degree of sort of grid investment, and what the government is doing related to large infrastructure projects and how they're looking to then manage those, I think is very important, because all of those factors together, you know, it all permeates down, right? It has significant impact on the ground over time, either through how the grid develops and therefore how everyone needs to be positioned, and what role everyone needs to play within the overall ecosystem, or just practically for what it means for the end customer in
Mm-hmm.
reality. Whether it be subsidies, we don't have significantly high subsidies, particularly on the solar and battery side here in the UK. We have some subsidies on the heat pump side, and I know
Mm-hmm.
there are some for low cost for low income housing, and there's some we don't pay VAT, so sales tax on renewable installation technologies like the hardware itself. But I think if I was to tot it all up together and sort of accumulate it all, I would say that we are a lower subsidy environment than historically has been the case in a number of other geographies that have seen higher penetration and higher delivery. I know obviously the flip side of that is that when those things go away and or those programs are changed, it can be a challenge, as I know it has been within the DACH and the Nordic region over the last few years.
Is there anything else you want to add before we get into the rapid fire part?
No, we're good. No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So this one I have one, two, three, 5 questions for you.
Okay.
So if the UK grid were a TV show, which would it be?
Oh God, if we were a TV show, what would we be? Uh, that's a really interesting question. My problem is I'm kind of watching Downton Abbey at the moment for the first time, and I think that's quite interesting, and I think it's very quintessentially British. Um, uh, I don't know. I think my experience thus far of the first two seasons of Downton Abbey probably is quite akin to it, right? Because I think as a grid, we are, you know, I think we mean well, but we're quite archaic in our current setup. But I think we want to progress
Yeah.
and do better.
Do you think energy management systems could one day be as commonplace in British households as tea kettles?
Oh, I think that's.
It's the dream.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem is do you need more than one smart energy system? Because I definitely have more than one tea kettle.
Why do you have more? Do you need more than one tea kettle?
I don't know, but I think
Or
most
is
people. I don't think you need more than one, but most people seem to have more than one.
really okay?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely think I have two, which is really kind of worrying. But look, what I say, look, I mean, fundamentally, everyone needs at least one tea kettle, and I think that at
Hmm.
least everyone needs one smart energy management system. So my hope is that the answer is yes.
How would you describe G100 in one emoji?
Ooh. I think it's the guy the bicep. You know, because it's like we're
Ah,
achieving it, right? I think it's good. It
sure.
means you're strong. You're good for the system. So I think we'll go with that one.
If you could ban one energy buzzword, what would it be?
Ooh, if I could ban one energy buzzword. Um, God, there are so many. Well, because we're just a very lingo-based system, right? You know, where there's
Extremely,
just there's
yeah.
just so much. I would probably just honestly ban array, which I know is a really stupid thing to say, but just I think there's so much lingo that trying to explain fundamentally just the basic level foundational information that for people to understand how the system works. And array is always one that people struggle with for some reason. So there you go. You can have array.
Nice. Actually, that's a surprising one, but I like that one. And then the last is what is an energy myth you'd like to permanently delete?
Here we go. Topical for this. That having an export limitation means that you will not be able to put any energy into the grid. Because and it's not necessarily a
Mm,
myth. I would say it's just what people's understanding of it is.
yeah.
Because fundamentally, people hear limitation and they assume they can't do anything. And I think it's a real challenge. So I mean, it's topical for this discussion, but
Yeah.
I oh, actually, I've got a better one as well. So that one, but I would also say that the the grid can only be decarbonized or could be decarbonized fully by large infrastructure projects. I think that's a commonly held belief that people in the UK at least have not wrapped their head around. I'm talking about, I guess these are two big barriers that we deal with every day for customers to kind of make decisions. And the myth that is propagated, I think, a lot by large business and people who have backed or stakeholders in these large infrastructure projects is that um, they are the solution. They are part of the solution, but they cannot be the whole solution. Otherwise, we wouldn't have G100 compliancy, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation, and we haven't had anybody on to talk about the UK energy market specifically. So I'm glad we were finally able to do this.
Absolutely. And yeah, look, thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully, I gave at least a small insight into the UK market. We're behind, but we hope to catch up. So let's
Yeah.
see how we do over the next 5-10 years. But I and I think we generally are very hopeful that we can take a lot of the learnings from you guys on continental Europe and hopefully catch you up a little bit.
Thanks. If you'd like to learn more about the world of renewable energy or energy management systems, be sure to check out our website, gridx.ai, where we produce regular blogs and glossaries about the subject. You can also follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter and Instagram at GetGridX.